What are your night shift horror stories? Worked a parking garage at the airport. Cleaning the top deck and noticed about 100 ravens all over a truck with a tarp over the bed. Took my flashlight expecting something awful. Noticed as I got closer the smell and the ravens taking turns going in a hole they had torn open and popping out covered in gunk. Some guy left a broke down beater with a couple animal carcasses in the back to rot. No heads. Checked the logs and the damn truck had been there since November and it was April, so everything was just thawing and breaking down. Oh God. What do you do in such case? Was running the register at 24 Hours Supermarket. Stock person comes running into produce carrying mop handle screaming "You motherfucker." Out of sight, he keeps yelling "fucker" and smacking handle at something. For like 5 minutes I am ringing up customers and freaking out because he was losing his mind, but I am not interested in getting involved in a murder, so I ignore it. Later I find out he was chasing a rat. Completely reasonable response from the stocker. Reminds me of when I worked in a grocery store as a teenager and the produce kid, of all people, got stuck cleaning the staff room. He found some baby mice on the top shelf in the closet, where all the lost toques and mismatched mittens and gloves got shoved away, so he put them in a cup and went around showing his co-workers, including me. The customers were, needless to say, pretty grossed out by it and management had to sit us down and explain why the produce kid shouldn't have done that. But at the same time, the store was giant box in a field at an edge of town. There were probably thousands of mice in the field out back, and yeah, they probably went looking for a warm place when it got cold outside. Cleanliness might reduce the chances of mice invading your space, but it doesn't stop them. Warmth is warmth, and food is food. I'm not sure why a single litter of mice in the 3 years I worked at that store indicated that it was dirtier than any other grocery store in town. Used to work nights at a Home Depot. There was one time where for a week or so our store stayed open 24 hours. For the most part this wasn't really a problem. Typically nobody comes shopping for home improvement items at 2 in the morning, except that one couple that came looking for marble countertops at 1:30 in the morning and the woman was wearing a nice dress. I guess there was also that one young lady who came looking for a toilet paper roll holder a little after midnight. I had just gotten off my first break, and she was wearing jorts and one of those white with black belt stereotypical karate outfits. She was oddly specific about which roll holder to get, too. But the real story lies within the insulation. It was nearing 3 in the morning and me and another guy were stocking insulation, as well as fixing the bays and some such maintenance. A bunch of big R30s had fallen in their bay and while I was sorting through them a fucking hand came out of the mess and grabbed my arm. I lost my mind enough for not only the guy I was working with to freak out but also for my boss, who was across the store, to come check out the commotion. Turns out a homeless drunkard had come into the store at some point, and I can only assume before the night crew showed up, and had made a nest in the insulation where he fell asleep. The dude was in bad shape, too. Like, far gone into whatever inebriation that we had to call the police to remove him. I was always a little more cautious around the insulation after that, for at least the time the store stayed open 24 hours. That sounds terribly itchy. I used to work night shift as a care aide in an old folks home. It was already creepy. The home was an old hospital that was converted. Some asshole kept walking around the courtyard after dark dressed as the Grim Reaper knocking on doors. It was actually really scary. He ran off and the facility got a security guard for a few weeks. I bet it ended up on YouTube. Like and subscribe, guys. Of all the heartless and insensitive things to do, I swear some people are simply devoid of morals and it's not a new phenomenon. It's always been this way. Warning, medical gross stuff incoming. I worked in an emergency room. The worst night that comes to mind involves a patient that was bitten by a baby timber rattlesnake. He was bleeding out of every single orifice by the time he got to us. More blood than I'd ever seen before outside of a motorcycle versus 75 mph head first to asphalt. I don't remember how many doses of Crofab we gave him, but it was the hospital's entire supply. But trying to get him stabilized, arranging the helicopter transport to a bigger and better equipped facility, all the blood, those weren't the worst parts. The worst part was when the patient lost control of his bowels. I will never, ever, forget that smell. I spent the entire time standing by the door with a battery-powered fan and a handful of gauze pads saturated with cinnamon oil trying to reduce some of the smell. The doctor occasionally stuck her head out just so I could waft the cinnamon oil in her face. Yes, by some miracle, the patient did end up surviving, and as far as I know he made a full recovery. But the blood, the smell, and just the shock of it all. Yeah, never underestimate a baby timber rattlesnake. People seem to forget that the baby had the same venom as the mama, and babies never dry bite. I always thought rattlesnake venom was a coagulant and causes intense contracting muscle spasms. Maybe I'm thinking of another snake. Was an orderly in a hospital. Two of us were sitting in the basement office adjacent to the morgue. A guy passed our office, looking at us a little shifty, came back again and asked if we had access to the morgue. We said yes, thinking he was doing a pickup for a funeral home, but that seemed strange given it was around 12 o'clock to 12:30 am. Nope. He wanted to pay us to let him in, and leave him alone with the bodies for an hour. We escorted him up to security. Apparently he had tried it in the past, as security knew him. Did he have a hot plate and a six-pack of beer? Necrophiliacs are disgusting, at least the ones who try to act on it. Bodies of the deceased are one of few things that everyone treats like sacred items that shouldn't be disturbed unless necessary. Worked at a distress center almost 10 years ago. Was on the 12 am to 6 am shift. Got about 2 phone calls each hour of the shift from the same guy saying that he's tied up in a room, his balls are tied up with leather straps, and his wife is getting banged by 5 giant black guys in the other room. Asked him each time if he's in distress and he says no every time. Kept telling him if he's not in distress then he shouldn't be calling and let him go. I just can't believe he was up from 12 to 6 am to make those calls. Gotta be a weird kink thing. Worked for a phone company in a call center a few years ago. There was a famous customer called the cigarette creep. He would call at late hours. Whenever he got in line with a male he would instantly drop it and call again. When it was a female, he would introduce himself like a normal person and ask for random information about our services. Before the person started their response, he would then ask, "May I light a cigarette?" and then would masturbate while they talk. That's what people assume, which is probably right, since he would take care not to overstep and give enough reason for us to finish the call. But he would sometimes groan and say dirty stuff. Work in the winter for me is plowing and snow removal. It was late and I had been out for over 24 hours at this point, pulled over into a small cul-de-sac with the nearest house being over 100 yards away so I could let the truck stay on so I could stay warm. 6-wheel Mack things loud. As I'm nodding off, there was a very loud bang and it felt like someone pulled on my driver's side door handle. Luckily I always lock my truck doors. I immediately threw on every strobe/rear/headlight and started looking around and I saw absolutely nothing. It scared the shit out of me. Needless to say I never sleep anywhere other than lit parking lots now. This sounds a lot like exploding head syndrome. Did hospital security for about 2 months. It was small hospital out in the sticks so we were responsible for removing patients who had passed from their rooms and transferring into the morgue freezer. We had just brought a decedent to the morgue and right before we were about to transfer them to the freezer their cell phone rang. Granted, pretty tame compared to some stories, but at the time it gave us a decent fright. That's actually really sad. Someone was trying to reach them and didn't yet know that they had died. The nurses did you dirty if they didn't remove all the belongings from the body before transfer. Worked as an evening manager at a major Hilton property. Got a complaint from a bunch of guests about the noise coming from one of the rooms. Turns out, a drunken man was beating the shit out of his wife and had the door barricaded so we couldn't get in. I called the cops, and they had to get into the room using the balcony from the next room over. I'm still traumatized by what I saw when they finally arrested him and got the wife out of the room. She was covered in blood. It was horrifying. Oh shit, I was working in the restaurant/room service at a Hilton in college, and, while no one actually saw what happened, my manager told me he saw the inside of the room and it was covered in blood. Like on the bed, on the carpet, in the bathroom, on the walls, etc. The guy told my manager his wife got a nosebleed. Saw all kinds of crazy shit working room service at the Hilton. Do major hotel chains have a way of sharing no service customers? I'd say this guy qualifies. Subscribe for more hot Reddit takes in your inbox, guaranteed.